Coincidence. To some, it's a random event or a seemingly unconnected series of circumstances that defy explanation. To others, it is a function of a deeper intelligence at work, with all events being either preordained or somehow intrinsically tied together. This next story is about a young Irish nurse, and whether it was sheer coincidence or fate that intervened in her life remains something of an enigma. As a caregiver dedicated to healing and comfort, did good fortune smile upon her, or did tragedy converge on the same path that she took in life? Or is this story about a curse that was placed on an iconic line of ships? This is extremely strange. Born October 2nd, 1887 in Bahia Blanca, Argentina, Violet Constance Jessup was the first of 9 children born to Irish immigrant parents, William and Catherine Jessup. Sadly, only 5 of their children would survive. Nursing seemed to be in Violet's blood, as she spent a great deal of her childhood tending to her younger siblings. As a child herself, she was stricken with tuberculosis and given little to no chance of survival by her doctors, but nonetheless she did recover in rather miraculous fashion. Her father passed away from complications following surgery when she was only 16 years old. The family then moved to England, where she attended a convent school and cared for her younger sister while her mother worked as a stewardess on an ocean liner. When her mother fell ill, she left school in order to help support the family and applied for the same job her mother once held. In 1908, at the age of 21, she was hired by the Royal Mail Line and was assigned to passenger cargo vessel the Orinoco. An attractive young woman, Violet actually had difficulty finding a job as a stewardess because her prospective employers claimed that her beauty and her youth might work against her and cause problems amongst the crew and passengers. In fact, over her career, she claimed to have received at least 3 proposals, with at least one of them coming from a very wealthy passenger in first class. No. By 1910, Violet began working as a stewardess aboard the RMS Olympic of the famed White Star Line, which was the largest civilian liner in the world at the time she was hired. The Olympic's maiden voyage was conducted the same day as her sister ship, the superior-sized Titanic, was launched, and was captained by Edward Smith, who would later go on to serve in the same capacity on the Titanic. This is already off to such a terrible start. On September 20th, 1911, the liner left Southampton and, while parallel to each other, collided with a British warship, the HMS Hawke, a ship whose bow had been designed to sink ships by ramming them. Fortunately, there were no fatalities, and while 2 holes were opened in her hull and a propeller twisted, the Olympic managed to make it back to port. Wow, that was a close call. Hope that never happens again. On February 24th, 1912, the Olympic suffered another setback when it lost a propeller blade on a return voyage from New York and had to be sent to the dealership for repairs. On April 10th, 1912, 24-year-old Violet Jessup was seemingly given a pardon from experiencing further issues aboard the Olympic when she was reassigned to another White Star Line ship. It was the jewel of their fleet and the largest ship in the world at that time. That ship was the RMS Titanic, and one that displayed the higher standards of luxury. At first she balked about the idea of working for the Star Line because of stories she'd heard about rude passengers and long hours, and the idea that she would be paid £2.10 for a month's work. And despite all the issues on the Olympia, she liked it there, But her friends convinced her to go. "Go on the Titanic," they said. "It'll be fun," they said. It wasn't. Violet was a devout Catholic who, before the maiden voyage of the Titanic, had been given a translated Hebrew prayer by an old Irish woman that was intended to keep her safe from fire and water. 4 days into its maiden journey in the North Atlantic, lookout Frederick Fleet spotted an iceberg immediately ahead and alerted the bridge. First Officer William Murdoch ordered the ship to steer around the obstacle and to reverse engines, but the order came too late, as the starboard side of Titanic struck the iceberg, creating a series of holes below the waterline. Amidst the ensuing chaos and panic, Violet was ordered to go up on deck and act as a calming influence and a model of rational behavior for panicked passengers, some of whom spoke no English and had difficulty following directions. As the crew loaded lifeboats, she waited patiently until being placed in lifeboat number 16. As it was being lowered into the water, an officer handed her an infant that apparently had been found on deck to keep safe. From there, we know the rest of the story. Within 2 hours after impact, the Titanic sank to the bottom of the ocean, claiming the lives of 1,503 passengers and crew. The following morning, Violet and the other occupants of Lifeboat 16 were rescued by the RMS Carpathia. Now actually, the Olympia was the first ship to receive a distress call from the Titanic, so they fired up the engines to get there as quickly as they could to assist them. But eventually they were told to stay away because of the resemblance between the two ships. It was thought that seeing the Olympia may further traumatize the survivors. When they were on board the Carpathia, Violet recalled a woman who she presumed to be the mother of the baby entrusted to her, grabbing the child out of her embrace and running off without saying a word. Hope they got the right kid. But anyway, 2 nautical disasters is enough for one lifetime, I would think. Or maybe not. Despite her terrifying encounters with disasters at sea, Jessup remained with White Star, and during World War I, she served in her capacity as a stewardess for the British Red Cross. On November 21st, 1916, she was assigned duties aboard the HMHS Britannic, which had been converted into a hospital ship and deemed to be the most modern and safest of the Olympic class of ships of the White Star Line. Man, how many times are we going to fall for this, "Oh, this is the safest one" thing? While in the Aegean Sea, near the Greek island of Kea, on a mission to return the sick and wounded from the Mideastern war regime to England, the Britannic was shaken by a tremendous explosion, and within 55 minutes the mighty ship sank, claiming the lives of 30 of the 1,066 on board. It has long been suspected that the ship was either torpedoed by a German submarine, or more likely had run into a mine planted there by another enemy submarine in a clear violation of the Geneva Convention. Violet was preparing a breakfast tray for a fellow nurse who was feeling ill and couldn't join everyone in the dining room. When she felt the explosion, she remained calm, and despite likely knowing something was horribly wrong, insisted that her colleague's breakfast be eaten, then assisted her in getting dressed and helped her to an elevator and onto the boat deck. Violet ran back to her own cabin to gather a few essentials. By the time she returned above deck, none of the lifeboats had yet been deployed. As the ship began its final descent into the Aegean, as was the case aboard the Titanic, she was ordered to put on a life jacket and go on deck to calm and set an example for the passengers. Eventually, she boarded one of 3 lifeboats lowered over the side prematurely, without order to do so. As the ship began to list and sink, the captain ordered a full stop, which trapped all 3 that had been lowered to the port side. Violet and the other passengers on hers barely escaped death, as the ship's propellers began sucking the other two under the stern. Just before the propellers were stopped, she jumped out of the lifeboat she was in to avoid this fate, and in doing so suffered a severe head injury, later diagnosed as a fractured skull, that she eventually would recover from. The Britannic would gain the title as the largest ship lost in the First World War and the world's largest sunken passenger ship. Coincidentally, two men, Arthur John Priest and Archie Jewell, both also survivors of the Titanic, were on board the Britannic as well, and both luckily survived. Trivia alert, I'll bet you didn't know that her story aboard the Titanic actually was the basis for the conversation between Thomas Andrews and Rose's stewardess in the movie Titanic. There's no way you knew that. Astonishingly, Violet continued to work for the White Star Line, returning to the company in 1920. In 1923, at the age of 36, Violet did marry a man 10 years her senior named John James Lewis, who may or may not have been a bigamist, but she claimed theirs was a short and disastrous relationship, and they had no children. In time, she went on to work for the Red Star Line, and then the Royal Mail Line, where she embarked on 2 around-the-world cruises on the Belgian land. Fortunately, beyond the pure ecstasy of sailing around the world, the rest of her trips were, I'm pleased to say, uneventful. And that was long overdue. She eventually retired just before Christmas at the age of 63 to a thatched roof cottage in Great Ashfield in Suffolk, where she tended to her hens and garden. In 1958, with friends, she attended the premiere of A Night to Remember, which chronicled the sinking of the Titanic. Violet Jessup died of congestive heart failure at the age of 83 in Great Ashfield on May 5, 1971, but not before experiencing one final twist of fate. After her retirement, on one particularly stormy night, she received a phone call from a woman who asked if she had saved a baby the night the Titanic met its fate. She replied in the affirmative, to which the voice on the other end replied, "I was that baby," and with a laugh hung up the phone. A friend of hers who went on to become her biographer was of the opinion that it was likely a cruel joke being played on her by a young village prankster. But she told him she had never told anyone that story before she had told it to him. Violet Jessup experienced more horrifying events in her tenure at White Star than anyone should ever in their lifetimes, including 2 of the most profound nautical disasters in history. Yet the love of her job and her desire to assist and comfort others trumped any notion of just simply walking away. Now, was this just a case of someone being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was it a case of a kind and courageous soul somehow being divinely placed in a circumstance that required exactly that type of individual? Now, it's said that the universe works in mysterious ways and everything happens for a reason. And if you doubt that, maybe the story of Violet Jessup will make you rethink that a little.